Yes.
It's not as though fear of nuclear war disappeared, did it? Because when I visited the USA as a student in 1963, various people proudly showed me their fallout shelters.
Yeah.
And fallout shelters were also being built in Europe too.
Right.
And I imagine this was a crisis that diminished, but the general feeling that there still might be a nuclear war persisted, didn't it, for very much longer?
It did, but I think it's different on the two sides of the Atlantic. Because on the other side of the Atlantic, almost all school children have been through an experience which nobody had been through since the British subjects were given gas masks in 1939. In Britain, you get a much, so in other words, everybody in the United States of a certain age has the same memory. I mean, there are various things that may be added on, there may be various things that are subtracted from it. It's fundamentally the same memory. At the age of 13, the school child that I mentioned, you don't forget having been told to go under a desk and adopt the brace position. If it happened to me, I'm sure I would remember. But in Britain, there are a lot of people, I think a majority, I can't prove this, nobody's ever done a survey of all of them, but a majority of children at primary school, the teachers and the parents would have sought to protect themselves and protect them against the knowledge that there was such extraordinary danger. It would be a minority that, as in the case of the 6-year-old that I quoted, would pick it up. So in the United States, there's that memory that people start from, which is that it had been bad enough in 1962 to actually go under the desk in the brace position. And I think that starting from that common and horrific experience, it means that the fear of nuclear war is more present in the United States than it's ever been. After all, there was the other reason, that it was more shocking. I mean, Britain over the centuries got used to being, if not invaded, well at any rate, nearly invaded. The continental United States had never been invaded except by us. Well, I'm thinking rather more recently. Now, I accept the Mexicans have a few things to answer for. But in 1914, Sir Harry Britton, the founder of the Pilgrims, the great Anglo-American friendship organization, was actually organizing celebrations. And the celebrations were that we'd gone 100 years without Britain and the United States going to war. Yes?
This whole crisis arose because of the relationship between Cuba and the Soviet Union.
Yes.
And you said that, Raul Castro had this sort of affair with the Russians and with communists. But Castro claimed that he'd never read a word of Marx, and it was the American reaction, sending explosives to cars and all this stuff, and the Blair pigs, which forced Castro into siding with the Soviet Union.
That's not the way the Soviet Union saw it. It may or may not have been right, but Castro's motivation is extremely elusive. Raul Castro's motivation, utterly straightforward, and it goes back to 1953. Che Guevara's motivation, utterly straightforward, goes back to 1953. But even people lay off just regarded Castro as non-ideological, and what suddenly persuaded him to change his mind in the way that he did. And I'll stress a few reasons in a moment, but I don't think we're quite come to terms with this. I mean, you recall that after the missiles were withdrawn, instead of like most of the rest of the human race saying, oh, thank God for that, he accused the Russians of having no balls because they were afraid of being incinerated. And their nuclear warfare, which seems to be rather sensible on the part of the Americans. So what you see, none of them said that at the time. What you see, or at least I've been able to see in the Cuban files that have been smuggled out of the KGB, which I think do correspond to other material, is that Castro's ego goes up absolutely enormously. So you find that by the end of the 1960s, the KGB residency station in Havana, instead of congratulating itself about how much is on site, is explaining that his ego is out of control. Now, the hardest thing in human history, it seems to me, is to explain somebody's motivation. We can only ever do it from external motivation. But how you get from the Castro who entered Savannah in 1959 to the Castro who actually wants missiles in Cuba, and he's very, very angry when they're being produced. All I can say is that not merely do I not know the answer, I don't believe anybody else does either.
You don't think America forced him into that position?
No. I mean, no, I don't. I mean, in any case, it wasn't forced into it. I mean, attempting to make sense of what happens, then of course the Bay of Pigs is like that. But I don't think his mindset is like that. If I were attempting to say, there's a logical sequence and it goes like this, but to judge Castro's mindset by a set of logical sequences seems to me so much at variance with the other evidence that I wouldn't go along that path. Other people, including yourself, are fully entitled. Gentlemen in the room. Yes.
You say Khrushchev was perceived as causing the USSR to be humiliated.
Yes.
And yet, it wasn't exactly quite like that, was it? Because America had to concede that they pulled their missiles out of Turkey, didn't they?
No, this is entirely logical. I'm simply telling you, and I don't think there's a great dispute
But what
about
I mean is
this.
that maybe
This is how it was perceived in the Soviet Union.
by who, though? Not by the general public, or by...
The general public had nothing to do with Soviet policy making. Any suggestion they did would be the most incredible reinterpretation of Soviet policy. But the whole of the enlarged Brazilian.
But maybe the Russians got their own way. Maybe that's what the whole idea was. To go to Cuba, put the missiles in, and then have Kennedy back down and say, okay, we'll take our missiles out of Syria.
You're fully entitled to argue that the Soviet Union should have said, the Politburo should have said, this is a great success. We'll keep Khrushchev on for as long as possible. Now that's a perfectly logical interpretation. All that I'm saying is they said the exact opposite. Yes.
I've read some alternative history, and it starts with that submarine launching a torpedo destroys an American warship, and the USSR is totally destroyed as a result of that. Now, isn't it the case that actually the American superiority in nuclear weapons was so enormous that, first of all, it might have been, for people who should say lack political intelligence, it might well have looked like the USA was in a position to launch a devastating attack on the USSR. And the second part of the question is, do you think that the fact that certain elements in the USSR felt that they were humiliated, especially for their competition for world revolutionary leadership, the Chinese, that led to an enormous Soviet rearmament program, which Khrushchev had actually held back?
Well, let's take the first one first. To my knowledge, and please anybody in the audience who knows evidence to the contrary, there was absolutely nobody, apart from the head of Strategic Air Command said after 2 week graduates, saying that there will be a surprise attack on the Soviet Union. What always happens, I think many other examples, 1983 would be another example, in an authoritarian regime, and particularly in a one-party state, when they're threatened, they begin to exaggerate the threat. I mean, at all times and all places, authoritarian regimes, because all opposition is illegitimate, when they identify opposition, they exaggerate it. Now, so far as the United States is concerned, I mean, there's this extraordinary difference between perception and reality. And as we know, any attempt to argue how people did behave in the past in terms of what we know was actually happening at the time always fails, because there is no known example in any major crisis in human history in which those people who took the decision, particularly on the authoritarian side, are operating from the same basis as Hart. So let's just take Kennedy. Kennedy had been campaigning during the dreadful 2 years that American elections lasted, so they could get around to electing somebody, on the basis that there was a missile gap, and that there was a bomber gap as well. In other words, that the Soviet Union had superiority in its nuclear strike force, whether it's to be delivered by missile or by bomber. As soon as he becomes president, or at any rate within a week when he's given the briefings, in other words in late November 1960, he and McNamara, his future Secretary of State, accept the fact that they are in fact superior. And the whole basis of his defence and foreign policy, as he argued it over the previous 2 years, is nonsense. Now, I'm not going to go through all the others, but so far as the Soviet Union is concerned, I think it does derive from the argument that I put. They had absolutely superb intelligence throughout the Second World War and at the beginning of the Cold War. And then they don't actually have any good intelligence at all. Within an authoritarian system, you cannot keep your job if you go to the political leader and say, whoops, yeah, we were brilliant 30 years ago, we were brilliant 20 years ago, we weren't so bad 10 years ago, now we don't know anything. Yes, just produce gossip. And what they produced was gossip. That's my explanation. There are other explanations which I haven't got time to go into.